everybody, it's Birdie from My Favorite Quilt Store, and I'm coming back to you with a new process for you, I believe, on the My First Quilt project. We're going to talk about machine quilting today, and I'm going to kind of walk you through how to get ready to take it to your machine to quilt. So I have the back laid on my table, and the right side of the fabric is facing down, and there's always more than one way to do everything. So there's different options out here, but this is my favorite way. So you want to make sure that you get this laid out. You don't want to stretch it, but it does get laid flat. And then I have some painter's masking tape, and I'm going to go around and I tape this down because you don't want this moving around, because you're going to layer the three layers: your quilt top, your batting, and then the backing. So, and for quilting by your home machine, what's great about that is that, and I'm comparing that to sending it off to a long armor. And I don't know if since you're just a beginner, if you know what that means, but there's a lot of people that don't like to do the quilting on their quilts. But we want to teach you how to do that, because it's very fulfilling, because when you can hold up your quilt at the end when it's all done and say, I did all this, I made this whole thing, and that's really cool to do. So I am going to tape around this whole thing, and I'm hoping you can see it in the camera. I'm not doing it, and I'm not, like I said, I'm not stretching it, but I'm just making sure that it's laying completely flat. And you don't want to stretch it, because you don't want it to like bunch up on you once you get done. So I taped this side, and now I'm going to go over and tape the opposite side. Got it all laying flat, and this is the batting that came with your kit. It's called Warm and Natural, and we may not use the whole thing. I don't think we will. I can't remember the exact size, yeah. But I wanted to show you, and I want to get this under the camera. Let's see. There's actually a right side and a wrong side to the batting. So you can tell by looking at this, they needle punched it, and they do that in the process of making it. And then you have the back side here that's all a little more fuzzy and whatnot. And again, you can see those little needle marks in there. The back side needs to be on the back side of your quilt. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to open it up, and so you can tell the right from wrong again. Where it's more fuzzy, that's the back side of the batting. So you want this to hang over a little bit of your quilt backing. Not a lot, just like maybe an inch or so. And the next thing you want to do, you want to smooth it out all over your quilt backing. So it's all completely flat. And now we're going to take our quilt top and we're going to lay it, and this is where you want to give some extra. And I go right at, when I do my my machine quilting at home, I want it to be roughly no more than 2 inches. I don't like, because like I said, I don't want that excess. And sometimes you have to pick it up and flatten it out with your hands. You're just smoothing it out. Okay, so this is it. The next thing that I like to do, and like I said, there's more than one way to lay out a quilt. Some people like, I'm going to pin it, and I'm going to use these really cool safety pins that you buy, and that's to help you pin it, because you're pinning it when it's a flat surface, and that little bit of a curve in there is going to help you put it in and be able to close your safety pin. So
Okay. I'll cut something in.
Okay. Or can we go on then?
Yeah.
Okay, so the next thing you do is you start placing these pins, and some people think they don't need a lot of pins, but the way you're going to be moving this fabric underneath your sewing machine, you don't want anything to come apart. The flatter it stays during your quilting process, the better off it's going to make it easier for you. So I've got to put all these different pins, and I'm going maybe 2.5 inches apart. So I'm just going to start pinning it. And this, like I said, is a little time consuming. But the other thing I was telling you, you can buy it's in a can, it's a spray adhesive. But they recommend that you go outside and spray, don't do it indoors. So I'm going to go and I'm going to finish pinning this. And then once that part is done, we'll show you what it looks like. And then we're ready to move to the sewing machine. Your best bet is to start pinning from the inside and work your way out. And after I put in a pin, I'm still making sure that my quilt is flat. And sometimes I'll just take a handful of my pins and dump them on the quilt, because it just makes things easier. This little tool is called a quick clip, and it really helps you when you're going to try and close these safety pins. And when I first bought it, I didn't realize that I was not doing it right, and I got frustrated, and it was just too complicated to use. But I am right-handed, so that means you hold this tool in your left hand. And if you're a lefty, you want to hold it in your right hand, because there's little grooves on the tip of it. So you take, I'm going to just pick one, and it'll catch in that groove. And that way you're not dealing, and you're able to just close the pin. So I'm going to do a few so you can watch. But it's, I want to get a good angle for the camera. Let's see. So it catches in one of those grooves, and you can see that it goes back and lays flat. But if you had to close all these safety pins without this, you would wind up hurting your fingertips. They'll get sore. Sometimes they bleed. So this really, once you learn how to use it, it's a lifesaver. So I've got to go around and close every one of these safety pins. And the other thing I want to say that, I know this might be a lot of tools to purchase in the beginning for a new quilter. You can do it without this. And the other thing you could do is, to make it easier if you don't have this tool, is you could go around and lift up the tape and take it off. And as long as you keep it on a flat surface, then you can close those and it won't hurt your fingers as much. But I have the tool, so I'm going to use it. You can see how fast I'm able to close these. You just got to kind of be at the right angle. So I'm going to finish doing this. Okay, so I got it all pinned, and I think I got everything closed. But the best way to tell if you've not closed everyone is to come down to tabletop level. Oh, I see at least 2 that didn't get closed. So this is one. I'm going to put a couple more over in this border. So we also removed the tape, and if you can keep this on top of your table, and if you don't have that tool, if you untape everything and just leave it on your table and just move it around, because all those pins are in there, they're basically securing it, you could get by without that little tool, because you can pick it up, and something you couldn't do while it was all pinned down to the table. So this looks really good. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go to the sewing machine. So you can see the back, it's all still nice and flat, and you can see your little safety pins everywhere.
I'm going to start that and restart that.
Let's just put it over to the side for now, because I want to start with other stuff, okay? Okay, Okay, we're at the machine now. We're going to start putting the quilt under the needle to show you some things. But I wanted to show you my sample because every machine's a little bit different. I have a Janome at home as well, but it's set up a little bit different on this machine. So I did some quilting yesterday to make sure I felt comfortable with this machine. And as a beginner, what I would do is use whatever thread you're going, and I believe your little kit came with a color of thread. You might have two choices, but as a beginner, I would put the same color of thread that you're using on top, put that in your bobbin as well, because sometimes your stitches might show, and I wish I could get a really good close-up of this, but I did my stipple in this in a color that was going to show, and it's just an all-over meander kind of thing. But sometimes on the back, you get things from the top, like my green is showing through on here, and it's usually done on a curve. Either I'm going too fast or whatever, but that's all part of the learning process. So again, this is an all over meander, and they call this a stipple. And that's what we're gonna do on the center of the quilt around your heart, okay? The other thing I wanted to talk about, I believe you were given like this little sheet that wasn't all marked up. And it's a really, really good idea especially for a beginner, to have a plan in advance of how you're gonna do your quilting. So I didn't draw my stipple, but that's what I wrote it in there, stipple. And then I'm gonna be doing some other stuff on the outline, and I actually put like which way to sew and the whole thing. So it just, because you wanna have as few starts and stops as you can, because you'll have to tie off and knot it, and some people say that's not proper. I do it all the time, but you know, like I said, it's a good idea to have it's like a map of what you're going to do. And the only thing that's missing for me is that I'm not sure what I'm going to do in the outer border yet. And Margot had some ideas, so we're still working on that. But by the time this video is done, we'll show you what we're going to do in that outer border as well. So for free motion, and anytime you're quilting, you've got special special feet for your sewing machine, depending on what kind of a machine you have. So the first one I'm going to use is, they call it a darning foot. Most machines come with one of those. If you bought a new little Singer or something like that, or a Brother, a lot of times they'll give you this. If they don't, you can usually buy one. But once we get the stippling done in the middle, you put on a walking foot, and every one looks a little bit different. So on most machines, when you change your feet on your machine, they just kind of snap on and off. But for most machines, when you're going to do some machine quilting, you actually have to take the whole foot off, not just the bottom part. So we're going to start there. So my screw's over here on the left-hand side, and I'm going to loosen that so I can take this foot off. I just like to put this in a safe place because you don't want to lose this. So I'm going to stick it back over here behind me. And I'm going to put my darning foot on. And you don't want the feed dog. So on my machine, all I have to do is press a button and my feed dogs went down. And that's what you're going to want when you do your free motion quilting. So I'm going to put my darning foot on, and I can do it with that, but then you've got to tighten it with the screwdriver. And all these little screwdrivers, these attachments should have come with your sewing machine, and just make sure it's nice and tight. So again, the idea when you do a stipple is it's an all over meandering, and your goal is to not show jerkiness. And you could tell in some places it got a little jerky. You want like smooth edges, round curved edges, but it takes a while to get better at it and get good at it. So this is a practice thing for you, and I recommend practicing yourself before you try it on your machine. So I just took a piece of fabric for my backing, put in some batting, and then the top part, and that's what I practiced on yesterday just to get used to this particular sewing machine. When you're doing free motion, you're actually going to be moving your fabric around like this, and sometimes, especially, you know, this is easy to do here, but when you're dealing with a bigger quilt, sometimes it gets hard. So I am going to be using what they call Machingers, and they are used for when you're doing your machine quilting and stuff, especially the stipple. I don't usually wear them when I'm using my walking foot, and I'll talk about that when we get to that point. So we carry these, and I believe they come in different sizes. Yeah, this is a medium large, so there's probably a small medium, but what they do is the tips of these gloves have like I don't want to call it rubber, but it's like a rubber. It helps you hang on to the fabric while you're moving it around. You don't have to have them, but if you're having trouble moving your fabric around because your hands are slippery, or your quilt's just, it doesn't move the way you want, by investing in a pair of these, you're gonna make things a lot easier. Some free motion quilting, and we're just gonna do it around the heart in the center of your quilt. So around the red heart here, I'm gonna go ahead and stipple all around that. I'm gonna roll up the side of my quilt here because it'll just make moving it around a lot easier. So, and I don't mind having starts and stops because I always tie off my threads or whatever. You can just hold your quilt in the same place and do like 3 or 4 stitches in the same place, and then you can just clip your threads off. So I'm gonna go ahead and remove this first safety pin, and I'm going to pull my thread over here, and I am going to just start, and I'm going to start like right next, like in the center of that tip. And I'm going to, even where I'm going to use white thread, and I'm going to use white in the back as well, because I want you to be able to see my stitches. But I believe you were given 2 spools of thread with your kit, and that gives you a couple of options. Like on this kit, I think they gave this pale turquoise, or I'm not sure, and then the white, but I am using the white, and I've got it in my top thread and also in my bobbin thread. So foot down, and I'm just going to start meandering around, and you can just watch what I'm doing, and I'll try and give a little bit of commentary as we go. Again, it's to just do a free motion all over the thing without crossing over stitches that I've already done. That's your goal. If you do cross over, not a big deal. There's no police quilt out there. But so I'm going to start here, and like I said, I'll take those pins out as I go. So, and I always slow my machine down a little bit. If you have a machine where you can adjust the speed, I go a little bit slower when I'm doing my machine quilting. So yeah, it reminds me that I should raise my feed dogs, but I'm not doing that because I got my free motion foot on. So I'm gonna do a couple stitches right in place, okay? And then I'm gonna and then I'm gonna lift my foot up, and I'm gonna hold on a second. Okay. And I'm having a real hard time seeing where my stitches are. Okay, now it's time for me to remove this pin because it's in my way. And sometimes that's hard to do with your gloves on, so I might take a glove off. And I think that's the reason that some quilters only put a glove on one hand, because getting these pins out can be difficult sometimes. But I like to use both, meaning a glove on both hands. And I'm going to go ahead and remove that pin as well. So you kind of get an idea of what I'm doing. I'm going to go and catch this corner with a little, and I don't want to go over my applique. My goal is to not touch that heart, okay? And you can tell I'm just going to keep going. And that is another good thing about using a light colored thread like this, that you, especially as a beginner quilter, if your stitches aren't nice and neat like you like, because you're using a thread that doesn't show up so much, it's not going to show as much. So, and you can see I'm just taking those pins out as I come to them. And what I want to do is pull this up and kind of show you the back, and you can see my stitches on the dark color, just what it's looking like. That gives you a good idea of what we're doing and stuff. Okay. So by me doing all this rotating of my fabric, my quilt, you can tell why you need those pins, because you want to make sure that everything stays flat underneath, and you don't have, like, if you didn't have all these pins, you could get like a crease in your backing fabric, and that's what those pins are going to help you avoid. And I am right next to my applique heart, and I'm done. So I'm going to do several stitches in the same place, and then I have a machine that just cuts my thread, so I'm going to do that. Otherwise you would just pick up your feed dogs and cut your thread. So I can cut this out because I did that locking stitch in the beginning, and I love these nippers. If you've not used these nippers, they have that curved edge, so I can use them, and because they're curved, it lessens the chance of me maybe cutting into my fabric. You want to avoid that at all costs as well. Okay, so now it's time. What we can do is take this out from underneath the machine, and we can take a look and see how bad or how good things turned out. And I can cut my threads on the back side. Okay, so there's one thread. We had some, this is where I use my cutting thing, so I'm gonna pull that one, but it's hard to see. But we got no tucks or anything, and it's all, and I came really close on right here to crossing over, but I didn't. It's hard to see, but again, if I did, big deal. Nobody's gonna notice. So that's gonna be how you stipple, and I think it turned out pretty good. I did pretty good on my curves. I did get a little not so curvy. I got some little tips in here, but you know, it's done, and I like what I did, so I'm just going to leave it the way it is, because I would hate to have to rip this stuff out. But, and if you wanted to, you could come back and do some stitching in the middle of your heart, and I don't know if I'm going to do that yet. But so we got the inside of the quilt done. So the next thing which means I'm done with my darning foot. I can raise my feed dogs again, and I could tell that they're raised. So I am now ready to remove this foot, and I'm going to put on my walking foot. Okay, so they call it stitch in the ditch, and the ditch is right where the seam is. Okay. But I'm going to position this because I'm looking at my chart that I drew out. I'm going to start in the upper right hand corner, and this time I'm just going to back here, and so I'm going to start in this upper right hand corner, and I'm going to come down, and then I'm going to pivot and turn and go this way and come back, and then this, and then I'm going to cut into the next thing, but you'll watch how I do this. So I'm going to, my goal is to sew right down the middle of this seam here, come to the bottom and pivot, and then continue back and come back to where I started. So I'm just going to start going, and I'm going to sew right in that ditch. And you'll notice that I didn't do a locking stitch on this, but I'll show you why I didn't do that. Okay, right there. And then I get to pivot, and you always pivot with your needle in the down position. And on my machine, I have it programmed that every time I stop sewing, my needle is in the down position. So now we're going to do the bottom outline of that inner square. So I'm just going to keep going around. until I get back to where I started. So I'm going to remove some pins that I think are in the way because this is a big foot. You can see what the effect you get when you stippled around that heart. It's all nice and flat here, and there's a little bit of poofiness where you didn't quilt in your heart, and you're going to start seeing that because I'm not going to sew. I'm going to sew. My next thing is when I come back over here, I'm going to go over and we're going to sew the next section over, but I'm not going to sew in between every single square because it's a small enough quilt. You don't need to overdo it. If it was a bigger quilt, I would probably do that. So this is the intersection. Okay, this is right here is right where we started. So instead of cutting off and everything, because I don't want to go to the hassle of tying another knot, I'm going to continue to stitch out here, and then we're going to do the next round, and then I'm going to do the next round. So I don't know if we're going to videotape this whole thing, but I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to come back and on the camera I'm going to show you how I tie off or whatever. But I'll refer back to my chart because I want to see, I may be able to just keep going all the way around, but I'll have to look at that, okay? So, but for now, I'm just going to keep going. So I've done the stipple around the heart. I've come out here and I've sewed this row all the way around. Then I came over and sewed this row all the way around. So now I'm back in this upper right-hand corner. Okay, so I'm gonna come out here. I'm gonna now, according to my roadmap, I'm gonna come out here and I'm gonna start sewing. It's hard to see. I'm gonna start sewing. I'm coming here and I'm gonna start doing these. I'm still sewing in the ditch, but what I want to show you, I could tie off, I don't have to, but one of the things you can see according to my map, I'm going to come off, I'm going to keep going because it's just going to keep going and they'll come back and bring me around. But on the next one, I'm going to be sewing through the block on the diagonal. So I'm going to tie off when I come back around from this because I want to show, I normally mark that so you have a line to follow, and I'll show you what I use to mark it. But for now I'm just going to keep going, but now I'm sewing the tips of my triangles there. Okay, I'm going to be doing the tips on my quilt. I just got to follow how I did this. That's why it's always good to figure out your map, your quilting map before you start. Otherwise, you're having to stop and start and, tie off, and a lot of people don't like to tie off. Okay, so now I'm at that tip, so I'm going to pivot. We're moving right along on this. It's going pretty quick. What do you think? I should have made a turn there and I didn't. So, and I'm doing that on purpose because I'm going to sew over so I can lock some stitches in. So here it is from the front view. I just did, let me get this to life. I was coming this way, okay? And I should have made a turn here, but instead I kept going this way. No, yeah. So I gotta, and this is where, so I'm leaving that. So what I'm going to do, so that shows me where I'm at, okay? And that's why I'm leaving that tail of that thread. So I'm going to come back about 5 stitches back. And I'm going to put my needle in, and I have a hard time doing that. See, and I want it right where, okay. So I'm going to come here, and I'm going to stitch over. And by doing that, it's going to lock in those previous stitches. Okay. Okay, so now Now I can pivot and I'm going in the right direction again. And I just need to remember when I come to this corner here, I need to go back out to the outer edge again. So I'm gonna So I have this long tail. So I'm going to go to the back of my quilt, and I know I'm working, oh, I didn't trim it all the way from. Okay. So I want to pull that top thread to the back. So all I got is, see, it's already got a little loop, so I'm going to pull it through. And now I'm going to tie a knot. Let's see. So here's my two tails. I brought the one from the top down to the bottom. And I always like to tie off on the back. The more you go, you have an option. You could pull it to the front and tie off, but I wanted you to see, I was worried about the thread not showing, so I'm going to try and make it look like that's a continuous stitch, and I just keep doing my little ties. And then I do it again. I do it at least like 4 times. I'm giving it a little bit of tug, and there's still a little looseness in it when I do it. But then I get a sewing needle, hide these threads, so the ends of it. So I cut them off to be the same length, and now I'm going to thread it into my needle. Okay, then I'm going to come to my quilt. I'm going to go put one hand underneath, but I'm going to bury it. So I'm going to kind of pull it to the side right where I went in, right here. And I'm going to try and, you can feel for it. You don't want it to show up on the bat, but I'm trying to weave it into that batting.
Get closer to your machine.
Okay. So I wove it in there, and I can tell, I'm double checking, and it's not showing up on the front side. So I can pull this through, and then I just pulled it all the way. Now that knot's on the inside of my, where the batting is. Okay, and then I can just trim it off there. You know, an idea, you could see the quilting that we've done on it so far. We started with the heart, we stippled around the heart, and we came and we did this, and then we went out to the next. There's different ways to mark a quilt. We've got chalk pins, and then we have like a chalk roller. It's kind of, I like this one the best. It's just easier to use. The other thing that you can use, that quilters like to use, I should say, is freezer paper, the stuff you have in your kitchen probably. There's a back side that's a little waxy. So if you wanted to quilt around different motifs or something, you could just iron that on and you don't have to worry about marking it. So I've decided to put triangles on all these white points pointing, these light colored points going on the inside. So I'm going to come over here. I've marked I used my chalk pen, and I'm going to start right here. So I'm going to do a diagonal, and then I'm going to come in the ditch here, which is that seam, and then I'm going to come up here on the edge of my freezer paper, and I'm going to do this, and then I come back here, and you can wind up doing that all in one swip. You don't have to cut and stop and whatever. So it'll, like I said, I'm going to start over here, and I'm going to come and do this. So that's the first thing I'm going to do. And then I came up with an idea for the quilting in the outer border. We're going to get these so you have like diamonds, and that'll go all the way around as well. And I've been marking. I put a pin in where I wanted my points to come, so I'm like in the middle. Like here I've got a tip here which is in the middle of this square, and then I came down from this seam and I marked it here. You can mark this any way you want, figure out your configuration or whatever. It's always better. I like to plan ahead and do it in advance, and I can already tell that some of these lines have kind of faded away. So I'm gonna, now I can see it a lot better. And when I'm quilting out into the border, I don't go all the way to the edge of the fabric, because you've got to leave at least your 1/4 inch for when you add your binding. And if I went all the way out to the tip, you know, the edge of the quilt, I would lose my tips in the bottom of the diamond. So that's just something to keep in mind. And I'm going to mark a couple more of these. Okay, when you do this pattern that I've decided to do, I'll go around one way. I'll make it, I'm going to come here and I'm going to start doing my zigzags and whatnot. And you have to, I'll have to go around this twice to get all of my, because I'll be coming here and then here and then here and then here, and then I'll come back and do the opposite ones, the ones that'll intersect. Okay, and for this I'm not going to use gloves because it's all straight stitching, and we'll see how that goes unless it gets too hard for me to move around. So I'm just going to start, and this is that diagonal line in the corner. And I know this pin's going to be in my way, so I'm going to go ahead and take it out. Okay, now I'm going to pivot. And the good thing about freezer paper, you can use it once because it's got that waxy side on the back, and that's the side you iron to your fabric. I went too far. It doesn't, you can peel it off and you can reuse it. So if you, like I said, if you wanted to do some sort of a motif out in your border or whatever, or even in the middle of your quilt, you could iron that on and then, you know, sew around it and then remove it. It just peels right off. I'll show you here in a minute. And when you make these pivots and or these turns, whatever you want to call them, you have to make sure that your needle is in the down position. That seems kind of obvious, but I just wanted to mention it to you. And when I marked this, I removed my safety pins like one at a time and placed them where I probably wouldn't have to. So I got one side done, so now we'll show you what that looks like, and then I will finish this quilting and have something to show you of a finished product in our next segment of our video.